my garden. You're watching A Walk in the Garden with Liz Davey on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television. I'm Liz Davey, and this is my garden here in Norfolk, and this is the summer episode of the show. And I'm standing in my herb garden, and all of my herbs have done well this year with all the rain that we've had. I haven't had to water much. It's been rather nice. Only getting out to pick them sometimes has been a problem because it has been raining quite a lot. But now it's time to harvest the herbs. I've been using them in the kitchen and will continue to do so. But now I need to harvest some for drying to save. And I'm going to pick today some of this oregano. It's about ready to go to seed. Some of the other variety of oregano has already gone to seed. You can see the blooms on it, which are attracting a number of bumblebees, which is very good. Many of the herbs do attract the pollinators, but I'm going to pick this one, which has not yet bloomed. That's the ideal time to pick your herbs for drying or preserving, is right before they bloom. They're at their most flavorful at that point. And what I'm going to do is just use a little rubber band to fasten them together, and then I'll take them inside and hang them for drying. After I've dried them, I'll get them off the stalk and put them in a container to keep for the winter. And I'll hang several bunches. I make smaller bunches, they dry a little better that way. And I use rubber bands instead of string or ribbon because as the herbs dry, they shrink. And if you use a ribbon or a piece of string, your herbs will fall out while they're hanging. So that's what we do with those. I also have sage right here. We have lemon balm, lime balm, rosemary. The rosemary is a hardier herb, however, not quite in this climate. Although if we have another really warm winter, it may be hardy enough to withstand the winter. I have several different types of mint: strawberry mint, orange mint, chocolate mint. I've been using those in various things, desserts, and some main dishes too. I have some herbs that are not culinary herbs. That would be the rue. There goes a rabbit. Did you see it? You can take that out.
I don't think I got it on.
Little surprise coming out. He'll be over there. He'll probably come out over there later. I have rue and southernwood that are non-culinary herbs. Also tansy, and those I can pick in bunches and hang in my shed to repel insects and somewhat repel mice. I hang those in my garden shed. You could also put them in a closet, and they have a nice odor, more pungent odor, but again, they are not culinary herbs. They're strictly for pest control. We have sorrel that will, as the temperature cools, sprout some new blooms. And I have various basils and lemon verbena, and I also have lemon verbena over in my flower garden because I really like it, and it grows very well in the sun. I have several scented geraniums, and these can be used. They're edible. This one is a rose geranium. Down here, a peppermint geranium, chamomile, calendula. The blossoms of calendula can be dried and used instead of saffron. Of course, we still have chives and more geraniums up that way, and more mint and different types of sage. I also have thyme, lemon thyme, English thyme, summer savory, a whole collection of herbs that can now be dried to be saved or made into pesto. I also have herbs that we'll see when I get to the vegetable garden. Some of them I grow there because I want a larger quantity of the herb. And I need to put them in more sun as well. I was able this spring to open up this area a little more. Last year, the cherry tree just completely blocked this whole area from the sun. and we were able to take off a few branches that opened it up so it does get a little more sun now. And that's really helped. So if you have an area where things aren't growing too well, but the trees have overshadowed the plants, either perennials, annuals, or herbs, or vegetables, you may be able to do some pruning to improve the process. I still need to take out a few branches of this young oak to further increase the sun in this area of the herb garden. So take a look and see what might be blocking your plants from growing to their full potential. Now let's move over to the perennial garden. I had lots and lots of spring bulbs in this area, lots of daffodils that have expanded over the years, and some tulips and crocuses and hyacinths. They're all gone now, and the foliage has been removed when it turned brown, but that leaves some empty spots in the garden. So I've planted some annuals in here, and also I have some pots. This is Nicotiana, and I have also a lavender in a pot. Those will need to be watered a little more frequently if we don't get sufficient rain. And I've planted some new things. I have a little chrysanthemum and also monarda that I grew from seed, and these are just growing. And they may be moved later, but this is a good nursery bed for them. Speaking of spring herbs or spring bulbs, now's the time to order your bulbs. It's almost getting too late to order bulbs to get what you want. Many of the catalogs are out. You can go online and find spring bulbs. I don't recommend any particular bulb place. There are many of them. I prefer to order my bulbs. They seem to come at the proper time for planting. And sometimes in the stores, especially if you go to a discount store rather than a nursery, the bulbs are not the freshest. They're maybe a year old instead of being this year's version. So you might want to try ordering bulbs. There's a huge selection of beautiful things that you can order, and fill your garden with spring bulbs. The other thing I've been doing is weeding, quite a lot of that, because the rain has brought the weeds. And I've been carrying this with me, which is poison ivy killer, because you need to recognize poison ivy. And I've got some right down here, just a tiny one. And I use the stream and hit just the single plant. But I do carry this with me as I weed, because I tend to forget where it is if I say, oh, I'll go back later. I don't, and then it has a chance to grow even further. The birds carry the poison ivy seeds. They love the berries of the poison ivy. It's a wonderful wildlife food. However, you don't want it in areas where you're going to be working, picking flowers and weeding your flower beds. So I do carry that, and just kill the single plant. Don't just spray the whole area. We have things that are in bloom. I have lilies, and these are the oriental lilies. I'm sorry, these are the Asiatic lilies. The oriental lilies have already passed for the most part. I may have one or two still hanging on, but these are the oriental or the Asiatic ones, and you'll note the pollen in the middle of each of these plants, and I'm staying far away because the pollen will stain your clothing quite badly. That's why you cut those off when you bring lilies into the house for a floral arrangement. But I will leave them on in the garden, but if I wanted to work closely with them, I would cut them off. If they do happen to stain your clothes, it does not come out in the wash. It leaves a huge stain. However, if you put your garment out in the sun, it will come out. The sun will take out the stain, where all types of washing does not. I learned that the hard way when I got a white shirt covered with it. And I read how to take it out. put it out in the sun and it disappeared. So that's a tip if you get that on you, or on a tablecloth if you happen to have lilies in a floral arrangement on your table. Right now, these are the daylilies, and daylilies are not related to the Oriental and Asiatic lilies. Daylilies have roots, they grow as a plant. The Asiatic and the Oriental lilies grow from a bulb, and those bulbs will be in your bulb catalog when you order tulips and daffodils and hyacinths for fall planting to bloom in the spring. You can also order lily bulbs, and those can be planted in the fall. They'll come up in the spring and they'll bloom in the summer. The daylilies have pretty much finished their first set of bulbs. There's one hanging on here, and there is another bloom. This was loaded 2 weeks ago. Now I will cut these back all the way down to the base and remove some of these unsightly pieces at the bottom. And they may bloom again. Some of the varieties are reblooming, and they will tell you that in the bulb or in the plant descriptions when you buy the plant. Happy Returns is one of them. I have one called Red Returns. If there's returns in the title, then you can count on the lilies coming back. But they need to be cut back, or they'll form. Right here we have one that's forming a seed pod. And if they start doing that, then they won't rebloom. So you want to make sure that you cut off your old stalks. It also makes the plant look a lot neater. Here's another one that is gone. That was an apricot color. We have things, preview of coming attractions. These will be asters, pink asters that will bloom in the fall. I have a few annuals scattered throughout the garden, some zinnias and some marigolds that I grew from seed, and those will kind of help carry over the season. The phlox is starting to bloom. In early June, I cut back my asters, my tall asters. These are shorter ones, which I did not cut back. And I did not cut back the phlox, but the rabbits did. So these are blooming a little later. All of my phlox got a nice haircut, and you would have thought they read about what's called the Chelsea chop, which is an English term, which means cutting back some of the perennials in probably early June, early to mid-June, expecting them to bloom a little later. They become a little fuller, and they're less apt to fall over. So I did that with a couple of the asters that last year kind of overwhelmed the whole garden. And the rabbits did it to my phlox. The rabbits seem to pick a different plant every year to eat. 2 years ago, they ate all of my short asters. This year it was the phlox. Who knows what it might be for next year. But we have had a lot of rabbits this year. This is an Oriental poppy, and it's on its way out. I have another one I'll show you. These will be cut back all the way to the ground. They will form new foliage in the fall. They won't bloom in the fall, but they will put up some new foliage. And then in the spring, they'll put up their foliage and bloom in about June. This is a milkweed, the orange milkweed, and it's also called butterfly weed for good reason. The monarch butterflies love it. And being a milkweed, it is one of the foods that the monarch caterpillars can eat. And the blossoms have good pollen for the adult monarch butterfly. It spreads, but not too quickly. The native common milkweed spreads extremely quickly, and it is a good plant, and I do have some out in wilder areas of my garden. But this one is a little more polite, and it does attract the butterflies. Also, move this way, I have the monarda or bee balm, and that too attracts the pollinators and the butterflies. That is the native form. I also have the Didyma, Monarda Didyma, which is a red one, and that's on the other side of the garden. And again, more of the oriental lilies. And these are one called Scheherazade, which I think is pretty. It has a kind of yellow center, which goes well with the black-eyed Susans. Behind that I have some Veronica, and I've been deadheading that regularly. It has grown tremendously this year in width, and it has blue flowers, and it will bloom for quite a long time if you take off the stalks. Once they finish blooming, just clip them back. It will continue to bloom. As will the black-eyed Susans. They will bloom a while too. Sedums are starting to grow. This is one of the asters that I cut back. Last year this was up here already, and it just kind of overwhelmed everything. So by cutting it back, I've kept it to a smaller size, more compact, and also a fuller plant. So when it blooms with its blue blooms, it should be a little more attractive. These were alliums that bloomed. These were white alliums. And what I'm going to do is cut these back very soon and dry them to use in winter arrangements. The flowers are gone. These are just the remaining seed heads. They're kind of attractive. Some people even spray them in their garden with colored paint. I tend to pick them and use them later. And again, I may spray paint them once they've dried. Peonies finished blooming, and again, we cut off all the blooms. They are pretty trouble-free in this area. They aren't going to bloom again, but the foliage stays nice pretty much until late fall. If you do have mildew problems with it, you can spray it with Serenade, which is a fungicide, or some people use a milk and water combination for powdery mildew. That seems to be more of a problem for me if the weather is dry rather than the damp weather that we've been having. I have a few other annuals in this area, some snapdragons, which have already bloomed, a couple of the shoots, but they're putting on secondary. Once your annuals have bloomed, be sure to deadhead them or take off the blooms. That's what deadheading is. And you can keep them going. Often they'll put up other shoots and bloom again. This is an allium. It's related to onions and chives. And it's just coming into bloom with its purple blossoms. Again, nothing really eats that. The rabbits don't bother it. Deer don't bother it. It's pretty trouble-free. Echinops in back with its little Sputnik type blossoms. They're blue, and again, they can be picked and dried, and they will keep their color if you pick them while they're bright blue. I usually like them in the garden and forget to pick them. This is the daylily called Red Returns, and I'm picking off the old blossoms right now. I will cut back any stalks that have finished blooming completely, and again, it will keep blooming into fall. It won't have as many blossoms as it does right now, but it will have some right on into fall. Here's one of my herbs that I plant over here. This is pineapple sage. It's a very tender herb, and it has a delightful aroma. Unfortunately, when you cook with it, it loses its aroma, so you need to use it chopped and raw, but it's nice with mixed fruit, perhaps melon. It has a wonderful pineapple aroma. It will also have some blooms that are red. Usually blooms a little later in the season with these lovely red blooms. Again, a white phlox in back, just coming into bloom. Many people's phlox has already gone. Again, mine is late thanks to the rabbits, but they've been leaving it alone now. More daylilies, and I put in a few dahlias. Dahlias are another thing that grow from bulbs or corms, and I have some at the back of the garden, and I put in a few here. There's an orange one, and I'm not sure the color of the one in front of it because it hasn't bloomed yet. I have a variety of colors in orange and yellow and purple, so we'll see what that one is. Again, mixed in with the black-eyed Susans, we have some more of the Monarda. This is the redder one, and it's a different variety, but it's still attractive to pollinators. Also, Monarda was once used as a tea substitute back when the colonists were having a little disagreement with the British about tea. They decided to use some of the plants that we have growing in the native plants. Instead of tea, they made tea by drying the leaves of things like the bee balm or Monarda. Moving up this way, I have a few hosta under the tree, and we have more of that in back, but where you have a lot of shade, hosta is a dependable plant. This gets just enough sun that it blooms quite prolifically. I also have an echinops, and this is finished blooming, but I still like the seed pods. They're nice and spiky. And they add a lot of variety, especially along with a grass. This grass will be turning kind of reddish as fall progresses. And where we've taken out our bulb foliage, we have a lot of spaces where I can plug in some chrysanthemums as fall approaches, once they start going on the market. Chrysanthemums here don't seem to be particularly hardy unless you can plant them in the spring. But they make a very good filler plant if you want to add color to your garden in the fall. Now, let's head over to the vegetable garden. Another garden that's kept me busy this year. The vegetable garden has grown beautifully this year. We've had plenty of greens. I still have plenty of lettuce that can be picked. This is perpetual spinach. We had regular spinach, and now we have the perpetual spinach, which will last all season. It's more of a chard relative, and it lasts longer. I have pepper plants, which are not yet in flower or producing peppers, but I have hope. This is dill, and I have cilantro. We like cilantro. Some people do, some people don't. We happen to like it. I also planted some celery, and it's growing quite well. Cabbages. I grow mini cabbages. I only cook for 2 people most of the time, so a huge cabbage is way too much for us. So I grow these mini cabbages. This one's just about ready to pick. I have 2 varieties, and you can see that there are 2 varieties here because of the color. This has a darker green leaf, and that one a lighter green leaf. I've kind of lost track of which is which, but there were 2 varieties. I have broccoli, and you'll see a little white butterfly flying around. That is a cabbage butterfly. That is what causes the holes in my cabbage leaves and broccoli leaves if I don't spray it. I was a little late getting my spray on. I use a spinosad spray, which is a little safer than many sprays you can use. And you want to be sure to use any spray on your garden when pollinators are not out. That means either very early in the morning or later in the evening, so it has a chance to dry before they're about. Tomatoes are starting. I have some cherry tomatoes that I've picked already, and plenty of blossoms. It's kind of a tomato jungle, and I think it will be a tomato jungle going forward as they bloom. This was kale, and I'm going to be pulling that out. It's gone past its best use season. I've also pulled out quite a bit of lettuce that was in here, and radishes and spinach. And having those things pulled out now gives me room to plant some new crops. And I will plant some more spinach, radishes, lettuce, maybe some carrots and beets. And that will replace these. These will also be pulled in another week or so. And I have red cabbage over here that will carry on for a while until the new lettuce is ready, or red lettuce. So as any crop comes out, I try to plant another one. I had a row of garlic in here, and that has been pulled and is being cured in my shed. I'll show you that when we go out that way. Once the garlic came out, the peas came out. I had peas here growing on a fence, and I've taken the fence down, pulled the old pea vines out, and I planted next to the fence on the other side my squash, my butternut squash. And my butternut squash is running over the strawberries at this point. But it's starting to form little butternut squash. Butternut squash seems to be more resistant to the squash borers, which can be a problem. Start again. Butternut squash seems to be resistant to the squash borers that can cause a problem with some of the other squash. They bore into the vine and actually kill the vine before you get any squash. So I planted butternut this year. It stores well, and it's a squash that we really like. You can see some dill over here. Again, the garden is very wet, so because of the rain this morning. But there are some dill that's in blossom, and our cucumbers are starting. And the more rain we get, the more cucumbers we'll have, because cucumbers are very much full of water. But these dill blossoms will be used to make dill pickles. Even when they dry, they're good to use in the pickles. These were green onions, which have now turned in more to onions rather than scallions. And I'm picking those to use in the kitchen now as well. I have a few flowers in a row here. Some zinnias, I have some marigolds and nasturtiums, and a few calandulas, which again, the petals can be used in place of saffron in various things. And I have some Swiss chard up that way. Also, over this way I have beans, which have been quite prolific. We've been picking beans and zucchini and summer squash. I don't plant as much as I once did. I used to put in quite a bit of squash, but again, I'm not cooking for that many people, so I don't need quite as many of them. I have some opal basil over here, which is the dark basil. This is quite nice in a salad. It's just a little different in color. I have three. The opal basil, I also have Thai basil, which is a spicy basil, lemon basil, and then just the regular basil, Italian basil, that makes great pesto. Although the lemon basil makes a good pesto as well. Parsley has been slow this year, although it is coming now. And again, a few more flowers and some Brussels sprouts, which may or may not make it. It depends how long we have until frost. They're a very slow growing crop, and they're coming, but they are slow. So I'm out in the garden harvesting and weeding, trying to keep the weeds down, and picking whatever I can and using it in the kitchen, which we'll be doing a little later in this show. Oh, up that way I have one tomatillo, which is on a yellow support, yellow tomato cage, and the tomatillo's in blossom. One tomatillo will make a lot of little tomatillos for making green salsa. And hopefully, I see a lot of pollinators on it right now flying around. And hopefully pretty soon we will start to see some of the little tomatillos, which are kind of fun to watch grow in their little papery coats. All I need is one plant, however, because one year I planted 4 and we had bushels. So one is plenty. I've learned how to gauge a little more what is needed. And that just takes time as you grow. Now, the tomatoes I've been fertilizing regularly. Peppers I don't fertilize now. They're in blossom right now, but I don't want huge pepper plants at the expense of pepper fruit. So I'm hopeful that by not fertilizing my peppers, just keeping them weeded, there's a couple weeds right there. They're working on the road. That I hope to get a lot of peppers since I haven't fertilized them since about a month ago. Now let's head back to see some of the other areas of the yard. Last fall I took cuttings of coleus, which is what this plant is. Various types of coleus. And I did not buy any plants for this planter this spring. These are all cuttings that I took last fall that are growing in here. I have various kinds of coleus and different colors, different varieties, and I've mixed them all in this container. As you can see, it's gotten quite large. It's a semi-shaded area, and they really like it here. I will pinch out the centers, the little teeny centers in these plants, and that causes them to branch. And I've done that since they were small, and they will continue to branch. I've forgotten the names of some of them. This one's wasabi, I think. This one is autumn sunset, maybe. But they have different names. This is blacknet stockings. And I probably have tags somewhere from when I bought the original plants. But some of these I've had for years and years. I just keep taking small cuttings in the fall, which we'll do again, growing them in potting soil, bringing them in for the winter, letting them grow under lights all winter, and then in the spring they're ready to put in my planters, and I'm able to fill numerous planters with coleus that I have taken cuttings of. So I just wanted to show this. If you saw the cuttings that we took in the fall, you can see what they will turn into eventually. This plant is a pineapple lily, and it is a bulb, and that's a bulb, very tender bulb, and it grows and blooms. They look a little like pineapples. This one is already bloomed, and I cut off the blooms. There are bulbs in there, and you have to grow it. I plant them in the spring. I order them in the spring from the same bulb companies that I get my tulips and my daffodils and hyacinths from. But these are summer bulbs. They're one of the things that you can get with begonias and caladiums and other summer bulbs. And I have several others that I will be showing in back in the shade. But these are pineapple lilies. They come in several colors, and they aren't inexpensive, but they do multiply. I have been able to plant 2 or 3 different pots with these pineapple lilies. And in the winter, I will just let the foliage die back. I'll stop watering them, let the foliage die back. I bring it in, put it in a cool room for the winter, take it out in the spring and water it, and it comes back up. So it's pretty easy to grow, although this one I think needs to be divided come spring. So I'll pull it out, and divide the bulbs, set up different planters. You can also plant it in the ground, but again, you have to dig it up in the fall or in winter because it will not live in our climate all winter. It is a tender bulb, and most of the summer bulbs are tender bulbs. Now let's head back to the pond and shade garden. I grow a variety of plants in the shade. I like shade gardening. A lot of people are very frustrated by the shade, but there are quite a few plants that do grow in the shade. And you are not going to have a whole lot of color with perennial plants in the shade. To add some color, you need to add some of the tender summer flowering bulbs. Again, these are the ones that you get in the spring, along with the pineapple lilies. And one of those is a caladium, which is a fancy leafed plant. And this one is a white one with red and green edges and red veins. They come in various shades of pink and red and green and white. And those can be started indoors and then moved outdoors. They usually come in a package of maybe 5 bulbs, and I have them scattered around in the shade garden. You could plant several packages and have a much bigger show, maybe, and some of the red ones are very showy. I like to plant a variety of textures in the shade garden. I think that's what makes it different shades of green and different textures of the plants are what make it more interesting. This is Carex Ice Dance, which is a grass, and it likes the shade and also kind of a damper area. That works well. This was a yellow blooming plant in the spring. It was a marsh marigold, and it had nice yellow blooms, but now the blooms are gone, so we don't have much color with the plant. I have various ground covers in here. In the pond itself, I have the plants, and those will come in the summer. Again, those are bulbs that you plant in the spring, and you can order them. Alocasia, colocasia, these are colocasia. Alocasia is another one, and they're tropical bulbs. But you can plant them in the spring and they will produce the large leaves. And I've been able to save them in the winter. Again, I bring them in and set them in pans of water, and they will last through the winter. They struggle, but they do make it through. And once they get back outdoors and into the pond, then they prosper again. I do add to my water plants a aquatic plant fertilizer, and I put 1 tablet of this in each of the plants about once a month. I've brought out a fern that's a house plant, kind of adds to the tropical feel around the pond. I have another grass, which is a blue oak grass. This too likes the shade. Grasses can add a lot of texture to a shade garden. Astilbe, and of course hostas. And we have quite a few hostas. The other plants that can add color in the shade are begonias. And this is a fuchsia, which also tends to like it in the shade. These are 2 different types of begonia. This one's a trailing one, and this one is a more upright one. Again, they like it damp and shady, and they do add color. Most of them come in the pinks and reds and whites area. This is a Begonia bonariensis, big name for a little flower, but this is one plant. And I've had this for 3 or 4 years now, and it blooms and blooms. In the fall, I cut it back or let it normally dry, and then I cut it back before a frost and bring it inside, keep it over the winter, again in a cool room, and it comes right back in the summer. The same with the begonias, they will come back. Impatiens are over at the pond, and I have several containers of impatiens. I have not had good luck growing impatiens. They like shade, but so do slugs, and slugs like impatiens too. So I do much better growing them in a container where they're way up off the ground a little bit, and the slugs can't completely skeletonize them. Those I grew from seed that I started in about February. And I have several pots of those around the garden, again, to add a little color as we go. Hostas, I have quite a few of those. They've grown really well this year. You can see that one is a large one. That has a lighter edge, light green edge, in the spring, but then it turns entirely green as summer comes on. It's in bloom right now. Hostas will bloom. All of these bloom at different times, so I have different blooms coming. Whites or purples generally, or pale lavender. Once it's finished blooming, I cut off the bloom stalks. I don't leave them on. They're rather unsightly. So I do want to make sure that I deadhead those. Impatiens don't require any deadheading. They just kind of go away, and neither do the begonias particularly. Any that fall on the deck need to be picked up, but generally they don't need to be clipped carefully. Fish. Fish are in the pond. We've got 4 fish and numerous frogs here and there. A lot of times we don't see the frogs. They're around the edges, but often when it's a sunny day, they will come out on the rocks around the pond. We have kind of fun watching them. They seem to choose a place each year where they want to sit. The fish are here, and hopefully they'll come up for a little food. They decided to, here they go. I don't have too many, I have 4, I think. Yep. We've lost a couple fish. I think something has been able to get them. How, I'm not sure. One of them swam out of the pond when we had too much rain. Others have been gotten by perhaps raccoons or perhaps the blue heron. Though I do have a heron decoy and they have a place to hide, it's not always a sure thing, and the herons will swoop down and get the fish. So right now I have 4 left, and we've thought about adding a few more. These are just goldfish because I won't take a chance with an expensive koi due to the wildlife that's around and looking for food. Now let's head inside and see what we can cook up with some of the produce from the garden. I am loving summer. It's so nice to be able to go outside and pick some fresh herbs right before you cook. And use some of the produce from the garden too to make various things. Also, we have a good farmers market here in Norfolk. I'll give them a little shout out because they have lovely produce up there. If you don't grow your own, you still can get some lovely fresh things and enjoy them in the kitchen. Today I'm going to start by making a tomato tart with ricotta and basil. And I'm going to start, I have already put out a sheet of puff pastry. And this you buy in the freezer section at the grocery store, and then you thaw it in the refrigerator overnight. And it comes in sheets, or you can get patty shells too. But you want sheets for this. It comes 2 sheets to a pack, and I'm using just 1. And I have sauteed in a tablespoon of olive oil, a small onion, and 1 clove of garlic. Again, I've picked the garlic. It's already curing in the shed. It'll be in there for a couple weeks. I forgot to show you that while we were outside, but it just sits in there, stem and all, and then I will trim off the stems and brush off all the cloves. I trim off the roots and bag it up for the winter storage. However, I have started using that garlic in cooking, and this is garlic from the garden, also one of the onions from the garden. And I've sauteed those and actually browned them quite a bit, slow and low. And I'm going to spread those out on this pastry sheet. And I'm going to leave and add good 1/2 inch along the edge, but I just want to spread them out, spread them around, so we get a little bit, hopefully, in each bite. It isn't very much, but it's enough to add some flavor. And we'll use a few more over here. Spread them out. And then I'll put this in here. And now I have a cup of ricotta cheese, and to that I'm going to add an egg. Already making a mess. And some salt and pepper. I'm using white pepper. And some salt. And some basil. Maybe 2 tablespoons of basil. And I'm going to stir this well. Let's thoroughly mixed. I actually combined a couple different recipes for this. And then I'm going to just spread this around on top of my onions and garlic. And again, leaving some edge. Then I'll sprinkle it with a 1/4 cup of Asiago cheese. You can use Parmesan or Romano. A hard grating cheese is good. We'll just sprinkle that on. And you could probably put the ricotta down first and then add the onions on top of it if you wished. And then I'm going to add a layer of sliced tomatoes. Hopefully I estimated right, got the right number. Now, for the tricky part, if there is one, you'll notice I have it on a piece of parchment paper. And I have already put into the oven another baking sheet. And I want to slide this on to that baking sheet. It's a hot baking sheet. So, we did it. Now we can close the oven, and we're going to bake that for about 20 minutes. At 400 degrees. And we'll see what it looks like. By using a hot baking sheet, hopefully we keep the edge of the tart crisp on the bottom. And it'll probably take 5 more minutes after that, but we'll check it in about 20 minutes. The next thing I want to make is a salad. And this is a bit of a different salad with some green beans. And I'm going to start by making the salad itself. And I have farro, which I've already cooked. Farro is a wheat. It's an ancient wheat, an ancient grain. And we particularly like it as a grain. Alternative to rice. You could probably use brown rice for this. And I've got in this container, let's see, about 2 cups of cooked farro. I'm giving you the ingredients for a whole recipe. This is a half recipe, and it makes plenty. Then I have also tender cooked some chopped green beans. I tender cooked those in water for about 4 minutes. put them into ice water to stop the cooking, cut them in little pieces before I cooked them, and drained them well. And that was 1.5 pounds of cut up green beans. We'll add that to the salad. And then I want to add 1/3 cup of chopped toasted almonds, toasted for 5 minutes in a 350 oven, and 1/3 cup of golden raisins. And now we need to make a dressing for this salad, and I'm going to do that in the blender. I've got a shallot. Shallots are an onion relative. They are milder than onions, but a little sharper than chives or scallions. And I'll add to that, that would be 1 shallot. Shallots come in different sizes, so you can kind of judge by what you would want to use. And then I want to add 1/2 cup of olive oil. Actually, I think I want to add my vinegar first, but and we'll add the vinegar, half a cup of vinegar, and salt and pepper. Pepper, more salt. And then I'm going to add 1/2 cup of shredded cheese, and it calls for manchego, which is impossible to find at the local grocery. I'm using, but you can use a firm shredding cheese. This is pepper jack. Pepper or jack cheese would be good. I had not pepper jack. I had a cheddar jack combination. And then I will add the 1/2 cup of oil. And then we're going to blend this to make a creamy dressing. We may need to add a little more oil, I don't know. Definitely going to need to do a little pushing to get it all together, because I am making a half recipe. It may not come together as well. One more push, and we're getting a very creamy dressing when everything is blended together. And then I can add that to the salad. You can see it made a very creamy and we'll mix that in with our ingredients. And then I'm going to top that with some more of the cheese, just cut in pieces to serve with it. Sharp pieces, so there we have our salad. Get rid of a few dishes. The next thing I'm going to make is a blueberry sauce. Blueberries are in season, and again, we have a wonderful blueberry farm right here in Norfolk where you can go and pick your own. And I've washed these. I picked them the other day. Picking was good. It didn't take me long to fill my bucket. The rain has been beneficial for them too. And what I'm going to make here is a blueberry sauce. And this sauce is good on lots of different things. You can use it on pancakes, waffles, cake, ice cream. It makes a great blueberry sauce. And into my pot I have put, and again I'm making a half recipe, but I'm going to give you the ingredients for a whole recipe, which would be 3 cups of blueberries and 1/3 cup of brown sugar. An 1/8 teaspoon of cinnamon, a tablespoon of fresh lemon juice, and it would be 2 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice and 2 tablespoons of creme de cassis, which is a blackberry liqueur. That's what makes it special. I'm going to stir this together until the sugar melts, and then I'll stir it, continue to cook it. And we can cook this on high. I used a little bigger pan because it will bubble up as it cooks. I'll stir it just until the sugar dissolves, and then we can just let it cook for a little bit. The skins on the blueberries will break. And we want to cook and simmer it for about 7 or 8 minutes. Once the sugar dissolves. Bring it to a nice simmer. And while that's simmering, I'll put together a little hors d'oeuvre with some more tomatoes and basil. And this time I'll use mozzarella cheese. I guess this is a show with a lot of cheese, but we also want some basil leaves. I need 4 or 5 more. This is just the regular basil. I have a little bouquet of lemon basil here as well. I want some medium leaves. This is starting to boil. Turn it down. And maybe a smaller one. A clean board, and for this I'm going to use some cherry tomatoes that have been washed, and I'm going to cut them in half. This is caprese appetizer. Caprese generally is mozzarella and basil. Caprese pizza is mozzarella, basil, and tomatoes. So I'm going to start with a tomato, and then a basil leaf, a piece of mozzarella cheese, and the other half of the tomato. And we can put those on a plate, and I'll make a couple more as my blueberries cook. This is a pretty easy appetizer and very summery. if you're going to be making appetizers and using toothpicks, it helps if you get the round ones rather than the flat ones. It makes a nice little nibble. And we need one more leaf here. There's a good one. I do have water in these containers, but then I'll finish those off with just a little sprinkle of balsamic dressing. Use your favorite one. This is one I make. And just a little bit. Give it a little extra flavor. This is still a little cold, I think. Not enough that it's too messy. And there we have our little appetizer of Capri's appetizer. Yeah. Okay, our tomato tart is ready to come out of the oven. And it looks like it stayed nice and crisp. I would normally put it on a tray. I'm not sure I have one big enough at this point. I'm going to set it on a mat. And I'm going to add some basil that I've chopped up, fresh basil. And we'll just add that on top. Ideally, we would let it cool just about 5 minutes or so before adding the basil. Then we can cut this in slices to eat. And the blueberry sauce is ready. It's starting to thicken. I'll pour that into a little bowl. And I want to serve that with just a white plain cake. And you could use a purchased cake if you didn't want to bake a layer. You could use an angel food cake or a pound cake that you purchased at the store. And the blueberry sauce will be really nice with it. The blueberry sauce is also good, as I said, with pancakes or waffles. It will thicken up as you refrigerate it. It will become a little thicker. It's still pretty warm right now. You can serve it warm or cool. I picked some flowers from my garden, the black-eyed Susans we saw earlier, some hydrangeas, and these have started to turn kind of a greenish color, and that means to me that they're ready to be dried. I have trouble picking fresh hydrangeas, the white ones, having them wilt, but if I wait until they're this color, they tend to hold a lot better. And the white flower is called gooseneck loosestrife. And it can be a real pain because it's somewhat invasive, but it's also something that flower arrangers really like because it tends to hold its shape if you move it around. And it is a nice filler for arrangements like this. You'll notice that the container is a shell container, and I made that by gluing some shells that I collected onto a tomato can, an empty tomato can. And then for the bouquet, I put a canning jar inside that can. But these were put on with an construction adhesive and just using shells that were collected at the beach over the years. And, you know, otherwise they sit in a box in the closet someplace. But this way I can make a nice summery container with them and enjoy the shells a little more and remember times that we collected them. So that's our show for today, our summer episode of A Walk in the Garden. I'm Liz Davey, and you've been watching us on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television.